Hello, and welcome to VOW, Voices of Wisdom, the show that might not be for everybody, but everybody needs to watch this show. It's been, wow, maybe 6 months since I've been in the studio, and boy, do I miss it. But the show is based on relationships, and this is usually my mantra. Relationships are universal simply because they are all that exists. Nothing has meaning until you decide how it relates to you or how you relate to it. It is the process of making these associations that would determine the outcome of the experiences of life. Today we have an exciting show about relationships having to do with children's books. And my wonderful guest today is Joan Ranieri-Certain.
Thank you, Brenda.
How are you, darling?
I'm doing very well now.
Well, it's great being back in the studio and you being my guest today.
Yeah, so honored.
And just tell us a little bit about your background. I understand that you worked originally as a graphic designer in New York.
Yep, still do. I freelance in the area. But I started the top 10 agencies in the city as an art director. And usually as an art director, you have a team, so I worked with copywriters. And all that actually leads me to this now. But I still continue to do graphic design.
Where did you get your degree?
I went to Manhattanville College for a Bachelor of Fine Arts so I could be a painter. Okay, so didn't do that. And then I went to School of Visual Arts and learned more of commercial art. And then I was able to start working at New York Magazine. And I did a lot of editorial work and then went into advertising with companies like Ogilvy and Mather and Young and Rubicam. Moved across the country and then came back here.
How
to see
exciting
you.
was that? Thank you. But how exciting was that?
I think it was something that I always wanted to do. I've always wanted to be an artist. My parents were artists. My father was a photographer. My mom was a painter. And I was always around that. So I feel really honored because it really gave me a great foundation to where I am now. And I'm able to continue doing that. I gave it on to my son too. But it's something that I always loved, art and creativity and concepting, and I really want to continue to do that more, and more for kids.
Right. And you also, you taught after-school art programs?
Yes. When we came here, people had found out that I homeschooled my son, and we traveled a lot, so that's why I did it. But they felt because I homeschooled, I would have the capability of teaching other people's children. I think it worked, and I still continue to do that, but I did it for some of the private schools here and the museums and the libraries, and that is another reason why I really like to do the children's books, because I've had that relationship with children and see how they learn.
So tell us how this all started.
I did do another children's book series, and I did it with a friend of mine in advertising. She's also a copywriter, so we were a team.
Oh, cool.
We then moved cross country from each other, she in Montana and me back here. And she said, I have an idea for a book. I said, okay, share it with me. She sent it to me. She said, can you draw some illustrations for me? I said, okay. We did her books. We did 6 of those. And then after that was done, my son and my husband said, you should do your own books. You should write them, not just illustrate them. But I was so used to having a team and a partnership that I thought, I can't do this by myself. So I knew one thing, the stories of when my son was little. And
your son's name is Sage.
Is Sage. And
a wonderful young man, by the way.
Yes, he is. And my daughter's dog is Jules.
Oh, okay.
So I realized when my son was little and reading books to him, there were very few books with little boys in it. And it always was in my mind, I
never thought about that.
Right? Because you have daughters. You found a lot of books for little girls.
Yeah. Never thought about that.
Yeah. So I would make up stories for him. And I decided that I just would take the stories I knew of when he was little, which was fairly easy because I knew the stories, but I had never written the stories. And it was easy for me to envision it, because that's what I did in advertising, concept.
Right, right.
But when I started to think about the stories and all the things about little kids, I couldn't really fix on to one specific topic. So I just started with something about making friends, because you always want your children when they're little to make friends, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, especially with this bullying stuff that goes on.
Right. What is a good friend, and what if you
Exactly.
have a friend and the friend gets angry at you? Are they still your friend, or do you just leave them alone?
And how do you teach that to a child?
So that's why I started with the first book,
Wow.
Sage and Jules Will Always Be Friends, because it is really a story about, it's a story of a boy and a dog, but it's a story about friendship and how when something goes terribly wrong, do you stay friends?
Wow.
How do you get past that? Do you want that person as a friend? And they're only 32 pages. One side is just the story because I think it's good for sensory, for a child to just see the words. And the other side is the illustration. But the illustration I did with photos, because one of the other things about when I read to my son when he was little is I only saw illustrations of the main character. And if it was a human, it was just an illustration.
Right, right.
I wanted little kids to be able to relate to a picture, in this day and age, a photo of a real person.
Yeah.
And that's why I put together the photos and illustration. Plus, I'm young enough to remember, not old enough to remember, the Betsy McCall dolls when I was,
yeah, yeah.
and I would cut those out, and I remember then you'd have this little paper doll, but
Yeah.
it looked so real.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I do put the photos in, I leave a little white outline. My mom was not big on you have to stay inside the lines when you cut, so I like to add that in for the children so they see that it is just the world that you create, whether it's inside the line or outside of the line.
And that gives freedom instead of restriction.
Perfect.
There you
Right,
go.
right. And so then I decided, oh, I have another story, so I went on to Sage and Jules Make New Friends. And that one is about differences.
Oh, great.
And it really starts out about a little white dog and a big brown dog. But it kind of leads into the friend that Sage makes too. In the end, they decide that it really isn't about how different you are, but how much fun you have together. And I think that's important for little kids to realize. Just because you see someone across a playground, which is what happened to my son when he was little, and you think, wow, he has really curly hair, and I have really straight blonde hair. And this is really what happened to him. They became best of friends, and to this day, here they are, almost adults, and they still know each other.
That's awesome.
And nothing got in the way of how different they were. And the third book, Sage and Jules Go to the Beach. Well, we live at the beach. But that's a cute, and again, true story about a fight over a stick on the beach.
Really?
And what happens when, no, that's my stick, no, that's my stick.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's how do you resolve a conflict. But they're all geared towards 4 to 7-year-olds, and I think they're true stories about what kids encounter. They're simple, and I think life is simple, so that children will really relate to it. It's nothing complicated,
Right.
but it's just trying to find the simple answer to something that might grow to be complicated.
But you know, when I think about this, Joan, how critical and how important is that to put a foundation in a child? I mean,
yeah, I agree with you.
It's critical.
Yeah.
It's very critical.
It gives them answers, and right now they're in a life right now where they're being judged on critical thinking.
Absolutely.
And their brains can't wrap around critical thinking. So some things have more than one step. It might have 3 steps. And the story begins maybe at step 1, and in the middle we get to step 2, obviously. But at the end, there probably is a step 3. And kids probably don't realize that it's not something that you just presents itself and you can solve it.
Right.
There might be steps to getting to the solution.
Or a process.
Or a process.
Yeah.
And that's the fun about doing the books, because even as I write it, I realize that it's not, okay, there's 2 characters and they start on the scene. It really goes a little bit deeper into, not too deep for the children to understand, but it goes deeper into that there is a process to get from point A to point B, and sometimes there's a point C, you know, the resolution at the end.
And the great part about it is you actually use Sage's picture.
Yes.
I think that is so special.
I think Sage thinks it's great.
So tell us a little bit about how that happened as well.
So the reason I use his photo is I think everybody, whether you're digital or not, because I have some photos that were done the old style, where I got them printed. You look through all these photos and say, what am I going to do with them? And when he was about 2 or 3, I came across an article that said, just take photos of everything they do. Well, now all these years later, I was looking at all those photos and thinking, do I take photos of the photos that I don't have digitally? But I realized I could take the photos and put them into these creative scenes, which any child can do, which is something I also like to teach in an after-school art program, is taking the actual photo of a child and then creating this scene so they can see. They could be anywhere. They could even be in France. They don't even have to be here. But I wanted to take the photos because they can have a touchstone with a real person.
Exactly. It makes it alive.
Thanks.
It
That
makes
is
it alive.
I think so.
And that's what I took out of it when I start
Right.
really looking at it. So this is just so phenomenal. It really makes it alive. And not only that, it makes it, more realistic to they can probably learn easier. That's kind of how I was looking at it as well.
I agree with you. I like that they could, in fact, this is part of the after-school program, that they could say, that could be me.
Exactly.
I could be, even though the scene at the beach, these people might live maybe in the mountains, or there isn't a beach nearby, and they can say, but my scene, I was really there. I was at the playground, because there are scenes at the playground. And they can say, I can put myself into that scene, and start writing about it and be
Yes.
creative, because
Yes.
I want the kids to also take away that it's not just a book, it really is an art. So I call it from the hand, the head, and the heart.
Very nice.
Because it is something that is more organic. I did enjoy reading to Sage when he was little, but he was a kinetic reader. So sometimes he would sit and play with something else while I read the books. And that's something I see in a lot of kids, where you don't have to just sit. You might actually feel a lot more of it, and as I'm reading it, think to themselves, I see that as this way, and then they see the picture. So it involves them. That's another reason why I put a real photo in, because they can relate to it. It can involve them more in the art of storytelling.
And the other thing that I grasped when I was looking at this is the importance of the relationship of a parent reading to their child. That's so important to me, and I think a lot of that is lost, with the computers and this and that and the other. But that having that one-on-one, and that having that sitting down and having mommy read to you, even if he's kind of doing a little things, but it's that time, that special time, And what do you think? What is your take on that?
That's why I like to do it with Sage when if he was doing something, if he was playing on the floor, or he was building something. It was nice because we were together and he was imagining the story, and it wasn't something where it was mandated that it's story time.
Right.
And he's not looking forward to it. I wanted our experience, especially because we homeschooled him, I wanted the experiences to all be something where he realized you're always learning, you're always creating, and they can be the same. Learning and being creative can be on the same level. It doesn't have to be something that you do and you're still, and it doesn't conjure up things for you. I wanted him to look at scenes and say, I think I could see it this way, or I think if I were looking at that scene, these are the words I would write. So it's kind of fun because when I'm doing the books, sometimes I just have the photos in front of me and I don't have the words yet. And that's what I want to bring to the kids, that when you do see a photo, they do this now digitally, and they add their own creativity to it. And that is something that really needs to be tapped into.
Absolutely.
That's what made me be creative in art school when I did the work that I did in the city in advertising, the work I do out here. Sometimes all I have is a photo, and sometimes all I have is the words. So I can't teach them maybe how to concept, but they can be creative. And that's what I want to go back to.
And I think, the different way of teaching that has opened up, it sounds like so much to me that it opens them up to more. And it also restricts them from being prejudiced to me, because they see people more as the same than different. Or even if they are different, they accept them as different.
I think so. I mean, that's actually what I was trying to do in Sage and Jules Make New Friends.
Oh, okay.
That was definitely probably the basis of it, that all of us can be creative. And sometimes, especially when I had a partner working on the books and she was the writer, we were very different and we saw things differently. And then you could come together and be creative. And that's something that I just don't think they may feel lost or alone, or they can't do this, or they can't do a book, or they can't do a picture, or they can't draw, which I come across. Then I do all the illustrations in the computer.
Okay.
I don't draw anything by hand unless I'm concepting it and I want to really hone in, but I try to make it more organic. I know how to do all that, obviously, when I went to art school, but I try to make it just rise up and see what's going to appear on the page. So the program I use has layers in it, and when I bring it into the schools, I actually bring the real program. It's not a drawing program, it's a program I use for layout. And they can read the layers in the program and see that maybe now appearing is a sky and the birds and the flowers and the playground and where's the slide and the child and the bicycle. They start reading it and I bring the layers up one by one and they can see how to be creative and they can envision, oh, it doesn't all happen at once.
Right.
Which I think in their world, they think,
yes,
boom.
instant.
It's instant, and they can see, okay, maybe I can do this one by one. Similar to when Sage was little and I used to tell him, it's time to clean your room. I didn't walk in and see the whole room. I would say, that corner. Let's just clean that corner. So I'm trying to bring the kids back to just start with the sky. And then one by one. That's the fun that I have with them.
And that's so powerful. You know, the concepts, I'm thinking of all the concepts that you're talking about, because that alone helps them to know that they can. Instead of looking at this huge thing they have to do, they can take it a little at a time and process it this. Okay, I've accomplished this. And I mean, that can go on to their adult life.
And that's
Really?
Great that you say that, because that is how I look at it. Like even when I look at the kids in high school and see that they're getting these huge writing programs, and even now it's going down to the elementary school level, it's overwhelming to think, even if I said, okay, you're going to write 3 pages in a children's book, and albeit it's a children's book, but that's overwhelming. So that's why when I begin to write it, I start with just one idea. I start with, they're going to the beach. That's all I know. Then I can look at real photos, which is even easier. Then maybe the words will start to come. What happens when they're at the beach? Something has to happen. It's a slower process, but it's something they can all grasp. It's not, at the end of this, you will have a story. And I've seen that happen where it's overwhelming to them, but if I say to them, we're just going to talk about one thing. You're going to see grass and sky and a playground. Now what?
That takes so much pressure off.
Right, the stress, right?
It really does.
Me too.
Because even when in school, you know, there's so much demands on kids till it overwhelms them. But even how you even just described it, I felt the calming. It was just it's so easy.
And it's not a sensory overload. The cutest thing is, one of the books I had a van, and the kids saw the word V-A-N. They were 3rd graders. And I was about to show them this way the scene's set up. So I started putting on the sky, and the kids said, put the van on, because they hadn't seen it yet. So then I said, how about the trees, the van, the van, the van? And they were showing an excitement that they could relate to it. And I personally feel that's part of learning. Once you relate to it, now you own it. Like my father used to say when I was little, if you say the word 3 times, it's yours. I felt like they were now owning it, and they weren't feeling like it was being put upon them.
That's so key to me.
And I
So
see then I see the creativity. And well, what if they start saying, what if the van didn't come down the driveway? What if it went a different way? And what if it landed on the lawn? Okay, well, what if it did? So now there's a communication. Now there's a dialogue. I'm not lecturing. There isn't a monologue. Now we're actually creating. And then even if I never said, okay, now you're creating it. They are, but they're not being put into a box of this is the way you do it.
Absolutely.
They're owning it.
Absolutely. And that makes the world of difference.
Right?
The world of difference. I was a life coach. I still do it from time to time, but it's almost the same concept.
Okay.
I have them set their own goals because then they'll own it. It's not me telling them, you need to do this,
Right.
you need to do that.
Right.
It makes a whole big difference.
Right.
Because they own it, and then when they accomplish it, they're excited that if I can do this, then I can do my next goal. And that's the
Right.
same concept.
Because I even said to them, well, what if the person wasn't in the scene? What would you put in the scene? Well, I have a dog. I have a small dog. Do you want to use a small dog? Well, he has a big dog. Maybe we could use the big dog instead. So now I can see they're actually thinking about something where they want to place things, which is what their life is going to be about.
Absolutely.
Right.
So you go into the schools and do
Yes,
this.
I do. This series, what I do now is this series, I like to bring something beyond just the books. So I created these little Lillos. Now,
They're so sweet.
the little Lillos,
Yeah, show us.
the little Lillos are in S and J, and S for Sage and J for Jules. I do them myself, and they are in white so that the kids, this goes back to my kinetic learning, the kids can listen to a story, and while they listen to the story, maybe they want to start creating it with geometric shapes. So I started this one, they cut them out, and this is just felt, sticky back felt, and then they would continue on to the back, which is an example of what's being done here. They can do it with felt, they can do it with markers or permanent markers, but it's their creation. And I would be reading to them, and it's kind of fun to watch because they get involved in this and something else turns on, and they hear, and they start looking up to see, well, what's going on with Sage and Jules? It's almost like they form a deeper connection.
Right.
But because I do the art, it wouldn't be, I'd have to add the art back into it somehow. And then I also, not only do I do the books in English, and to segue to this, I also do the books in Spanish. And that was something that has always been in my heart. I studied Spanish in high school. Never knew that I was going to want to do it again later.
Right.
But it was always something I felt was there,
Yeah.
that I needed to bring another language. So I was lucky enough to find somebody, a fluent translator. She now lives in Argentina, raised in Manhattan. And she helped me to now translate the books exactly for Spanish. And I feel that there's another place for this in a bilingual class.
Yes.
For little children, where I can almost see it, where the English-speaking kids are sitting in front of the Spanish book, and the Spanish children are sitting in front of it, and then they compare across, like,
Yes.
in my book, when it says, whatever the stop, you have to stop doing this. This is mine. This stick is mine.
Right.
Then the children see this in Spanish, the same exact thing. And it creates yet another thing because it's now translations and a new language.
Right.
But they can compare it, and they don't feel isolated. I only know Spanish, you only know English. It's now combining it in a different way. So that's another goal of where I'm going with for the books.
And I'm looking at that too as the only thing that's different is the different words, but the picture,
Right.
the illustration
Right.
is the same.
Right.
So that's a connection. They have a connection.
Right. Child to child can feel like, wait, I have the same thing.
Exactly.
But, and it'll form some new synapses.
Absolutely.
And I even find it for the high school level too, because the high schoolers can use the different language book because that might be something where they cannot, when you're in high school, you get larger books, obviously, longer chapters. But they can look at a children's book, and maybe that's a topic that they can cover in the language where, okay, now you think you know Spanish really well, can you translate to your own children's book? So it creates something where it's an ownership that they feel like, I might be able to do this.
Exactly.
I'm trying to make these communications and keep releasing new synapses, creating new things so that there is more to just writing the words and making a pretty picture.
And this is This is Picture Me page?
This is called Picture Me Page.
Yes.
What I do with this is a one-off. So, and actually, this has been a part of an autism program where
Oh,
it was, I
really?
gave it as a charitable donation
Oh, wow.
to make more funds locally here. And the Picture Me pages, there's a photograph I have, and it takes a photograph in time. So it could be even you, Brenda.
Oh, it could be me.
It could be you, Brenda, at your favorite place when you were little.
Wow, that's
and
pretty cool.
Or it could just be you little and you want to remember something that a place you never went to, maybe a vacation that you really wanted to take and you never got to. And I put it into the illustration style of Sage and Jules. And I create a little caption for it. So Asia goes for a swim, but she went for a swim at her grandparents' house, and that was a favorite place for her to go. So I recreated. I might do the photograph similar, or I might add in the picket fence because we can relate to that, the picket fence. And it's just something for the wall. It's light. It's easy to hang in your house and
Really
bedroom.
cool, really cool. Well, this has been a great show. And what is your website, just in case
It's
anybody go to their
called-
website just to
it's-
check out your stuff?
Thank you. It's called sageandjules.com.
This has been wonderful. And if I had little children, I'm getting ready to have a grandchild.
A boy or girl?
A boy.
Oh, well, Brenda.
So I will have to get some of your books.
Yes, you can go to the website and you will see how to buy the books.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
This has been Val, Voices of Wisdom, with my guest, Joan Certain. And this has been a wonderful show talking about Sage and Jules. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you.